Welcome to Between Two Ovaries, your go-to for all things women's health.
A lot of people just say like, oh, my vagina.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that's
all
not,
of the above.
That's not your vagina.
No.
Well, it is.
We're here to cut through the confusion, bust some myths, and give you the facts straight from the experts.
You cannot still believe the amount of people that come to a gynecology clinic saying that they don't look right down there and they need something doing about it.
We're keeping it real, bringing you honest conversations about topics that matter to you.
Everything goes back to the menstrual cycle. Yes, it's a low-risk procedure, but it's not a no-risk procedure.
From periods to menopause and everything in between, we've got you covered.
So whether you're here to learn, laugh, or just listen, you are in the right place.
As soon as I said it,
Hello everyone, welcome to our episode on menstrual education. We have a very special guest here today. This is Ms Jones. So she is a vice principal and English teacher in a high school with an interest in personal development about making it more inclusive, something that is very close to our hearts as well. We've collaborated on this topic before because importantly, she is also one of my best friends from primary school. So we will also call you Nicky rather than Ms Jones if that's okay.
That's fine.
We have permission.
We'll allow it for this episode.
Brilliant. Well, very welcome to the podcast.
Thank
it's
you.
a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here, thank you.
Right, so we're going to jump straight in because we've got lots of questions because we're not sure about a lot of these things. So we're going to kind of be guided by you with this. So we're going to start with sex education in high schools because we know that that's your kind of area. So what is PSHE or RSHE,
That's
please?
a very good question.
Thank you.
PSHE is Personal Social Health Education.
I feel like that could cover a lot of things.
Yeah.
Spoiler, it does. It covers lots and lots of things. And I think one of the things that will come through today is that there is a huge amount of content and not always necessarily the structures to be able to support it.
Okay.
So that you are right, that encompasses lots of different topics.
Yeah.
And then RSE is within PSHE,
Okay.
and that is relationship sex education. I think what a lot of people don't always realise is that PSHE is no one really specialises in PSHE. So there isn't, if you're in a school, you wouldn't necessarily have a PSHE teacher. I mean, you might, but that isn't necessarily what they would have trained as, if that makes sense. So
Not a specific teacher.
Not a specific teacher. So I'm an English teacher, that's my subject, but we don't have any teachers in school where PSHE is what they've trained in, that's what they've gone into the profession for. And what that means is that schools are quite often using teachers from different disciplines to teach that. Quite often it's something that's quite not difficult to fit in the timetable because it's a priority, but there isn't a department necessarily where they have that, and there isn't a set amount of time that you need to do in schools for PSHE.
Okay.
So it is statutory, but it's not.
Like
There's
zero guidance.
there's not, not a huge amount to go with it. So there's quite a lengthy document that outlines what needs to be covered, and you are quite right, it encompasses lots of different areas which are really important, and I want to get across absolutely we should be covering this in schools. I think it's so important, but I think it's quite hard on schools because we don't necessarily have a department or staff where that's their full role. It's quite transient, I would say, quite often in schools, and again that's not to blame schools, they're doing quite a tough job there, but it means that I would say there are quite often inconsistencies about the way that curriculum is delivered, mainly because there isn't a set amount of time, and also because what that sometimes looks like is teachers who perhaps feel quite uncomfortable about certain topics. So there are some quite sensitive topics.
I am actually getting some flashbacks as you're talking.
Oh my gosh! Obviously we went to the same school, so we probably have a similar flashback.
Yeah.
Do you want to share
There
what your flashback was?
a teacher who did the sex education stuff in like year 8. She was she a geography teacher? Clearly wasn't her like forte. She was very embarrassed during it, and I think I remember her just getting out of her drawer different types of like, so some male condoms, Femidon, other things, and I think she was just like, so this is a male condom. This is a Femidon. And we were all like,
And I think
unruly children laughing.
I think what you have just described really encapsulates that perfectly in that. So we have a job to do. We want to get across this content that's really important. And I can't stress that enough. The things that are on PSHE and RSE, they are things that we need to be getting across. There's no doubt about that. But what sometimes happens, because we've not necessarily got the structures to support it in schools, it means that you might be a newly qualified teacher and you might be teaching something like pornography. and talking about, you know, how it's got to be kind of considered in quite a thoughtful way. And there's lots of intricacies and nuances that go with that. That's a tall order. I think a lot of adults would find that quite difficult, let alone if you teach these children all the time, you see them all the time, and then all of a sudden you're changing gears completely. You might teach them history, and all of a sudden you're talking about something that feels quite different.
I bet people would rather, if you were like, I know you're a history teacher, but would you rather teach like advanced maths, or would you rather teach about pornography? They'd be like, advanced maths. I hate maths, but I'll give it a go.
And I think that's, I think this is the difficulty, is that teachers work really hard. There is a lot of challenges that come with the profession, and I think what's difficult is you've got all of that with your own subject. You've got exam classes, you've got all of those things going on, and we all absolutely want to make sure children get this proper PSHE, well-rounded education. That goes without saying, but if you're in a random form time given a topic to do that might be contraception, that might be FGM, that might be something that actually is really complex and is something that has a great deal of weight to it, you might have 20 minutes on that and then you all go off to science or maths or history, and that's where it gets really difficult to get that right, because you want them to really have that properly, but then there are difficulties with the curriculum and the time that you have to be able to do that.
So I went to school in Scotland, and I have a question, because she's going to fly the flag here. We, at my school, and like my district, I know wider, we had like a full lesson period block, whatever you call it, that was that time. Is it just in your like registration time that you do this?
That's a very good example. So different schools do it differently. Okay. So I've been in different schools where it looks like different kind of formats. So I think the recommendation is that you would try to do an hour a week, but again, because that isn't necessarily a requirement, that can look different in different places. Some schools will do it in form time, and I can completely understand why you would do that, because it's, you know, you're going to get it to start date, it's a regular thing, and we want it to be that these messages, particularly around periods, particularly around sex education, that's not something you could just cover once. I know that we just covered it literally once. I don't think that's the right thing. But I think that really, I think form time, I do think that's, you know, there's a lot of, you know, perks to doing it that way. The drawbacks are that form tutors aren't necessarily well versed in that, and what I will say is PSHE, there isn't a huge amount of training available that doesn't have a cost attached. There isn't a huge amount of resources out there that doesn't have a cost attached to it, so there will be the odd thing that's free, but generally, like to get a PSHE curriculum, which is what it needs to be sequenced, it needs to be thoughtful. I think doing it once a day like that is great, but then you potentially got staff delivering it who might be really embarrassed, and then that impairs the message that's coming across. It means that perhaps it's a bit diluted, which is not what we want, particularly around topics that actually they maybe do need to have a bit of a tricky conversation. It's important to talk about that. If it's a little bit uncomfortable, it still needs to be spoken about. And then, so some schools will do the 1 hour a week, they will put it in there. Some schools do it in different ways, so some schools will have it that they have a department that's their thing, so it'll get added on to what they do, and I think that works well, because obviously they're more well versed in the curriculum rather than being at random. But I think with the 1 hour a week, again, it's quite hard, because it's an hour a week where, again, you're covering potentially quite tricky topics, and it's making sure also you don't know what everyone's bringing to the room, so how different children might feel about different topics. There's a lot to navigate there, and do it in the right way.
Ask like right at the beginning, because I want to know this, and we have talked about it a bit before, but I think it's very interesting. What are you supposed to cover? So you said statutory is RSE, and what within RSE are you actually told to cover by is it the government?
Yes. Okay. by the Department for Education.
Department for Education. What do you have to cover?
So
how specific are they on that?
So they give you a framework, and within that, so it's like healthy, respectful relationships, things like contraception, and there are quite specific bullet points within that. Okay. So I don't think the guidance is particularly flawed in that way. I think the more the issue is that how that actually is implemented in schools and what that looks like in real terms. And I also think there's a lot to be said for, like, so Alison mentioned before that we have worked together. I'm not a doctor, not in a hospital, that would be illegal. But we have worked together, we've collaborated, and I asked Alison to speak at my school. I've actually asked Alison to speak at my school numerous times. But what we did with the PSHE curriculum is that we would have it in form time, and they would be pre-recorded sessions, so by different people in schools that felt comfortable and confident with that. There is a drawback in that if it's recorded, you're not quite having maybe quite the same dialogue, but I also think on balance to have the information there and done, and we know it's accurate and ready. I think that makes a big difference. But what we wanted, like, inevitably and rightly, children have a lot of questions, and understandably so. So if you've got someone in front of you that is perhaps a little bit mortified, this isn't their subject, it's not necessarily in their comfort zone, your school have tried the best to kind of create these conditions for you, but it's still quite hard. If I think a child asks you, like, do you still have your period when you're in a coma?
Best question I've ever had. I was like,
really let me just take a second.
And do you?
Well, I
assume you've done your
research.
I
said I don't really know the answer, but some people will, some people won't, right? Because I guess it depends on what you're in a coma for. And
she gave a very thoughtful response. But again,
not on the spot.
Yeah. But they were and again, that was really good, because when you have people in the room that aren't an expert in what is a vast topic, like, you want children to ask questions about it. You want that curiosity. That's so important. Yeah, really. But then there probably will come a point where you probably won't be able to answer.
I mean, children are very imaginative as well, so I feel
they were very imaginative in the questions that they asked.
That was another good thing. I'm not their teacher, they don't know me. I'm a doctor to them. I'm this professional person, so they can probably... I can be. They'll ask me questions that they wouldn't maybe feel comfortable asking a teacher.
And this is what I was going to ask you. What do you think is best? Do you think it's better for teachers to do it or for someone external to do it?
I think this is contentious, and I'm sure the teachers listening to me, I know it's tough to advise. I think to be personally, I think a bit of both, to be a bit of a cop out there. So I think there is a lot to be said for if you have a good relationship with an adult and they're telling you things. I think you're probably more likely to take that in, a bit like if you've got a trusted adult in any area of your life, if they're giving you information, you perhaps attribute a bit more weight to it than you would if you're just kind of hearing it from someone you don't necessarily know that well. That being said, there are some topics that I think it's a tall order to ask people that might feel quite out of the depth. There is training out there, but actually the difference between absorbing training and then delivering that to young people is quite different. And I think particularly, so we, for example, when I was looking at the PSHE curriculum, we had form time, but then we would have days where particularly for more sensitive topics, where we would get external speakers in, so that it wouldn't be a standalone thing, because I think just doing it by yourself, you might just do one day a term. I don't think that's the right thing. I think it needs to be a consistent approach, and over time, if you have those days, then things like, as I've already mentioned, like pornography, things like consent, things like that actually it's very important we get that right, and we don't want staff who haven't necessarily had the training or aren't necessarily well versed in it. We don't want that message to get diluted for that reason. But again, it is important to say there is a cost attributed to that. So
it's not always accessible.
Exactly, and we had a company that came in to do some of the more sensitive content, and one of theirs was pornography, and he was able to speak in a much more candid way than I think any member of staff would feel comfortable speaking, because you've got to stand up in front of those children every day.
And your colleagues.
Exactly.
That would be my thing.
Exactly. I think that's a really difficult thing.
I think that we touched on it before. Yeah. You said that if you're delivering something and you're embarrassed, then surely that puts on the person that you're delivering it to that we should all be embarrassed about this.
Of course. Absolutely.
We're talking about period products, but I'm really embarrassed about it, so you should also be embarrassed about it. So I'm telling you about them, but just be embarrassed.
Of course. And this is the thing, you can't, you're subliminally perhaps projecting a bit of shame onto it, and actually that's the opposite of what we're trying to do. And I think it was brilliant to have Alison doing this, because one, it's getting the balance, isn't it? So they still had their form tutors were on the Zoom, and I was obviously also on the Zoom as well.
Which I was very grateful for. I was like, I can't control a room of 12-year-olds.
I would never have done that.
On Zoom because it was COVID, or?
It was to do with distance, and it was it was. So I think it would have been quite difficult for you to get from work to us to back.
Yeah, I was doing it in the middle of the day, I think.
Yeah, it was, and also I think it was the whole year group, and I think I felt a bit harsh making you stand up in front of the whole year group. We sort of thought to ease it, but again, you're a doctor and that's a tall order for you, so it's hard for staff. So we did it on Zoom. We were trialling it really, weren't we? And we had all the different form groups in year 8 joined, and then I joined to do a similar vibe today, do a bit of an introduction. And it was nice because obviously they were all watching the forums. So if anyone wanted to stay behind after and speak to their teacher about it, they've got the relationship with them to do that. But it meant that they did ask questions that I'm going to say now, I don't think, I certainly wouldn't have been able to have answered. And also I feel like the way that you talk about it's obviously an area that you're like really passionate about. Like it's something that you want to get across in an accessible way. And that's infectious, isn't it? Like if children feel like this is actually a really important thing that we're talking about, it's really good that we're discussing this today. I think that's going to perpetuate that attitude, isn't it?
We've said that time and time again, even at university, when you're teaching at university and I go in and genuinely stand for half an hour and tell them about the menstrual cycle, and afterwards people are just like, oh, can I get involved with like research with regards to it? And it's just the way that you put it across and tell them why it's important and why it relates to everything. I think it's that. I have 2 very quick questions.
Go on.
Can you be a teacher in PSHE? You're like, could you go and be a teacher?
You can be a teacher in PSHE, but as far as I'm aware, I'm just speaking for England and the UK. My understanding is that you cannot train to be a specific PSHE teacher.
Okay.
That my understanding is now that is not something you can train in. So you could, I think, when you look into it, you could be a RE teacher, you could be a citizenship teacher. There are things that, I mean, I feel bad saying that because they are not the same topic at all, and I don't want to say that those subjects aren't the subjects in their own right, because they absolutely are. But sometimes people will say, well, it's adjacent, so it makes sense. I know quite often in schools, people in the PE department, for example, they will look at those lessons because there's quite a lot of links between kind of the biology of it compared with the health side of it,
maths and PSHE.
But the thing is, you sometimes get teachers that actually it's like, you know what. So for me, for example, obviously I'm an English teacher, but I would happily talk about periods. Like that's something that I would want to pass that on. I wouldn't find that embarrassing. But everybody comes to it with their own, don't they? But so you can't. So as far as I'm aware, I apologise if I'm wrong about this, but you can't qualify as a PSHE teacher. You can be a PSHE teacher, but my experience has been that very few schools have solely PSHE teachers.
Okay. Well, my other question is, can students get a qualification in it?
So. No.
Okay.
But should they? So you can. So it depends on what layer of qualification you mean. Okay. So the subjects that are adjacent to it, so like health and social care, for example, will cover things that quite a lot of it will be on the PSHE curriculum. But again, as far as I'm aware, there is not a GCSE in PSHE.
Only because, do you know, like, and I don't know if it's a thing anymore, but when I did my A-levels, they started general studies, and we all had to take general studies. And I'm like, is there a PHSE?
What's general studies?
We did general studies.
I did general studies.
Couldn't tell you what it was.
It was general.
I'm not English.
It was vague. There was a maths. It was a bit like SATs, but for 18-year-olds. So you had an English paper and a maths paper.
I couldn't have told you that. We just got told that we had to take the exam. It was the first year. Okay. Yeah, it was fine. It was fine. But I just wondered whether, on that kind of same vein, there was some kind of.
I think that's a really interesting point. I think you just mentioned it there. Because if we're
saying it's so important that you know this, and we're saying it's really important that you know about maths and business and
of course
science and English and.
subject.
Sorry, and like there's so many subjects. Like if we're saying it's important, we're squeezing it into tiny bits of pockets of time.
I agree, and I think that's a really important point to make, because actually that also is about how students feel about it. So I know that when I was at school, and you are the same, Alison, because we had the same experience.
We did.
Shared. I don't think I really valued those lessons.
I mean,
they were few and far between, and there was no clear goal apart from to feel mortified.
And it came out of the blue as well. It was like, you're going into a geography teacher's class, you're expecting a geography lesson, and suddenly there's a femidon on the desk, and you're like, oh my god. And also like the chaos that, like, we went to quite lots of behavioural issues in our school, and it meant that the teachers couldn't control the students at the best of times, but when it was a topic like sex education, it was awful.
And this is the important thing to say. So and I think it's all about, there's lots of layers to this. So there's one, it's obviously how the school like deals with that and treats that, and the kind of the attitude surrounding it. But then there is also this top layer where we know that there is a funding crisis in education. We know that actually there isn't necessarily a dedicated amount of time. It is quite vague. We know it's a really important thing to cover, but actually what that looks like. So it's quite hard in some ways for schools to really press the importance upon it when we don't have those structures in place to make it feel more important.
But
so a little bit
think
of both.
about it laterally, whereby you have drama lessons and you have, I'm trying to think of lessons, but I'm also not trying to belittle anything because I did drama and dance as GCSE.
You don't need to name the whole national curriculum. You're
but like every single subject. But like if we're putting weight on those. And we're saying it's so important. I just, in a way, when you think about it, you're like, why don't we have it?
I feel like you should as well, because think of all the lessons that you did. This PSHE will actually have more practical applications in real life than a lot of lessons have. Like, I can say what I have in my pencil case in French.
Can you?
I can't.
No, not French.
Could you do it now?
Can we have
una regla? That's Spanish. Obviously not.
I feel like MFL education.
But the things that I would have learned in PSHE is things that you genuinely will use every day.
Yeah. Maybe it would be a case of like to have it taken a bit more seriously by everyone.
Yeah.
You need to have some sort of assessment. Maybe not like an exam, but you know, like at the end of it to show that the students have understood.
For me, it's about coming back to it. So I think where I find it worrying, and again, this isn't a critique on any school because everyone is trying the best in the structures that we exist in, but I would say when it is a one-off every now and again, and you might do, periods in year 7 and then never revisit it. You might do contraception in year 8 and you never revisit it. You might do first aid in year 9 and never revisit it. They're all things that you are going to need to keep coming back to. And I think if we think about other subjects, which, to be clear, I find obviously all subjects are on the curriculum for a reason. It's because it's not just about it's more than the sum of its parts, isn't it? It's not just what you get in that lesson. It's the bigger picture of what it adds to you as a person. I think that what those subjects have in common is that one, there's a clear goal that you're working towards, but also that there is this sense that you're going to keep on coming back to it. That there is a sequence that is part of something bigger, and I think. If it just feels like a standalone thing that doesn't really connect to anything else,
just make it more taboo.
I would agree. Like if you're not, if it's only every now and again that you're talking about it, and it feels a bit like. And it feels very different to your normal lessons. And I know I'm contradicting myself slightly here because I've talked about the importance of external speakers, but I do think there's a time and a place for that, and being, conscious of what topic you're picking for that to be delivered.
I think with that, I was thinking that before. I was like, to be devil's advocate, if you're getting an external person in to talk about a topic, does that make it more taboo?
That's a very good point.
But then, surely the most important thing is getting that information across accurately and in the right way. So, not someone who's really embarrassed and not wanting to talk about it.
I agree, and I think I have wrestled with this, and I think on balance, it's better to get the information across correctly and accurately and right, and then build in a bit of time where you can talk to your teacher about it. I think that's probably the way to meet in the middle.
If you move back a step from that, and it was somebody's actual job, and I'm not saying like as a sideline job, but an actual job, and you went to a lesson every week and that's what you did, then people wouldn't feel embarrassed about it. You wouldn't need an external speaker. There would be some kind of, people have got to get some kind of level of knowledge by the end of it. So it's kind of we need to take a big step back.
I feel like it's not even knowledge for you needing a test, it's knowledge for you needing to understand what's actually going on.
Exactly, and I think that's where I can understand schools not wanting to bring in an assessment system, because a lot of the things that we're talking about, they're sensitive and they're nuanced, and different people will have different relationships with the topic. So I can understand not wanting to kind of necessarily have a knowledge test at the end, but I understand what you mean about it. I think it's this idea that you're building up towards something and that it's got a weight to it. It's important.
But you could like in DT, for example, where if you did like cooking. DT? Design technology.
Oh, right.
I was like, you've been to school.
We didn't do DT.
We did. We absolutely did.
Wasn't that just cooking?
Do you not remember food?
No, because DT
and woodwork.
We called it
woodwork.
We called it woodwork and food.
Mate, this is so English, Cody.
I'm
like, none of this is what we call it.
I had a drawing lesson. Not even
not
art. Not DT, just drawing.
Graphics.
No, drawing.
That's very specific.
Was that specific for you?
This is me like in my geography lesson. This is a drawing lesson.
I love that.
Well, it's just
okay, design technology.
From a DT point of view, it was all coursework, wasn't it? So it was you could do some kind of project and coursework and like how you could get across. It doesn't have to be like, what is the age of consent?
Yes,
like,
of course.
When can you share pictures? Like,
talking about design. I was like, what?
So I think you're right, and some schools do that. To be clear, like I'm speaking from the schools that I've worked in, you know, and as we've learned, it looks different in Scotland. It will look different in different areas of the UK. I am thinking about the northwest of England, but there will, you know, some schools do that. They'll do it so that you'll have X amount of lessons and then you'll do a presentation on it to the class, or you'll do X amount of lessons, and you might go and support teaching that to a younger class, or whatever it might look like. As in this, I agree with you totally. There are creative ways of doing it, and I think that is where it's at its best.
I just think it's hilarious that you said that, because I am the least creative person in the whole entire world, and you just said that that's a creative way of doing it. I'm like, God, such a
creative voice in education.
So unlike me.
No, but I think it's a balance to be struck, isn't it? Where you don't want to make it so that it's about assessment at the end and almost you, because I suppose to what to get across is there are lots of overlaps with PSHE with other subjects. So the science curriculum covers quite a lot of it. The IT curriculum covers quite a lot of it. In terms of being safe, so in terms of being safe online, in terms of like,
that was not taught in my school when I was in school.
Well, that's a huge one. Can
I ask you then, just on that? Yeah, of course. You've mentioned, because obviously we wanted to know like what actually is supposed to be in the curriculum. Yeah. So, like consent.
Consent.
So it's safe relationships, healthy relationships, contraception.
Yeah.
You've mentioned that people talk about pornography. Is that meant to be? Is that supposed to be taught, or is that something that people have read? Okay, well, reading between the lines. That needs to be taught.
In the guidance. That is something that is good. Yeah. So the other thing to say with it as well, I think PSHE is particularly challenging because it needs updating all the time. Yeah. So when I was thinking about this on the drive on the way over, because I'm very exciting. I was thinking about when I did a unit on different like substances, and one of the ones, and vaping was quite new at this point, and it basically all I could find was, we don't know the impact of vaping. It's probably safer than smoking. And there was very little research around it. So that was what you said. And the difficulty is, obviously, things develop, things change, attitudes change, societal norms change, all of those things that need to be taken into account. So you have to really be on the pulse of things in order to be able to make sure you're getting the accurate message across. And I think this is where it's hard as well. So for example, in my subject in English, there are plenty of resources that exist. If I wanted to, so an inspector calls, for example, is a text that we teach, you could find resources from 10 years ago for an inspector calls. While some of it might feel a bit dated and you would want to update it, a lot of it wouldn't be factually incorrect, if that makes sense. Whereas, obviously, for PSHE, because it encompasses so many different areas,
there wouldn't be anything about IT and being online safe when I went to school. It was dial-up.
Mine was MSN Messenger.
Are you on the internet, Nick? No. Well, you are.
But that's a really important one to say as well, because obviously we know that the internet plays a huge role in all of our lives. But young people, the way that they interact with the internet, it is different to the way that adults interact with the internet.
I've never phoned the internet.
You're missing out.
You should have done, because it's a really enriching experience.
The wire out. I'd put the wire from the phone to
are you
the
on
computer?
The internet?
Oh, God.
So it's a really humbling experience to wait for that to happen. Yeah. But I feel like...
Sounds like when you've only got 3G.
But I suppose the point is, when I hear about things on social media, I think I hear about things that young people can access on the internet. Like I feel quite surprised by it, and because they're interacting with it in a completely different way, and I am not a 13, 14-year-old, so I don't know what that looks like. But if we think about, for example, Andrew Tate, if we think about, there's a lot of we live in a time where divisive content is the order of the day. Yeah. We live in a time where things are increasingly polarised. If we think about some of the misogynistic things that children will interact with, a lot of it, the adults in their life won't really even know about. Yeah. So it's hard, because you can't ask about what you don't know. Yeah. And I think that's a really important one, and what PSHE is trying to do is, and again, it is in the IT curriculum as well, but I think in IT, the way that is talked about is much more kind of, not factual, that's not quite the right thing to say, but it's about the information and like being safe, all those things, it does come into it. Whereas when you look at it from a PSHE perspective, it's more about kind of the feelings surrounding it and how it impacts your identity. Yeah. You're looking at it almost through a different lens, if that makes sense. So I think that's a lot of schools, what they will do is and this is right, you'll look at the PSHE curriculum, you think, right, well, it overlaps with science there, it overlaps with IT there, there's some bits on food as well, nutrition, so that overlaps with food, or DT. So you'll think, right, okay, great, we've covered that there and there, and that is true, but you are looking at it from a different lens when you're looking at it through PSHE, and I think that's an important thing. The internet is a very good example of that you are looking at it differently. It's not just about the coding that's involved, it's not just about the logistics of it or the practicalities of it, it's also about, like, what does it mean to, have a door to this world that is huge and that is actually really hard to navigate and changes all the time.
So you've quite nicely told us, like, lots of different barriers there are to PHSE there, but you've done quite a lot in your schools previously to try and make it more inclusive. What would you say are, like, there's probably lots of different things, but what are the key things that you wanted to implement that were different when you did that to make a change, and why?
So I think one of the big things was everybody learning about periods.
Okay.
That was an important one.
Everybody meaning?
Everybody, like, boys and girls.
Boys and girls.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you look at the PSHE...
At the same time or separate?
So I think the important thing is that they both know about it. I think there are arguments for or against. So some people would argue, and I do understand this, that maybe you might feel a bit embarrassed if there are boys in the room, you might not want to ask questions, and it's important to get that information across. I personally think there are a lot of benefits to learning about it together, but I can see arguments both ways. I do get that.
I think purely not being a teacher, not doing PHSE, I think putting them together means that they're not going to then feel embarrassed when in future they need to talk to each other about it.
100%. I think it's hard, isn't it? It's the balance between, I can understand, I think there's schools of thought in teaching where, if you feel embarrassed about the information, you don't want to ask about it because there's these other students present, is it better? But then I also agree with you. Like, I think having everybody in the room, I think, is really important.
Maybe at an early enough age before it becomes an embarrassing topic.
I think it makes
it absolutely. But I remember when we didn't call it PSHE. No. But when we did, I remember being in year 6 because obviously, I don't know if you mentioned, but we went to the same schools.
Primary school and high school.
And college, actually. Wow. Not to say, that was sad. Anyway, so when we were in year 6, I remember the boys were put in one room, the girls were put in another classroom, and we learned about wildly different things.
And it was all very secretive. It was like, okay, today the boys are going over there, the girls are going over there. We got told, you will get periods, your boobs will get bigger. Yeah. And then the boys, we never knew what they got told. No. They never told us.
I still don't know.
Top secret.
And they don't know what we got told. It's just all very, like, taboo.
Hopefully they know now. Hopefully.
But they might not.
No, they might
there are
not.
examples of, like, professors of reproductive science, like research, who male, who, not people I know, this is something I've listened to on a different podcast, who do, like, research into periods and genuinely think that, like, a woman bleeds like 10 mils over a whole period. Like, have a completely, like, wrong understanding of what a period is, but because they probably didn't get taught properly back in school, and they don't.
Sick in that book.
Yeah, exactly. There's loads of, like, really horrendous myths.
And I think one of the big ones actually that comes through in schools is that it's like weeing. So you should just hold it in.
We've covered that in one of our episodes.
That told you, you could push your period out in 3 days.
Yeah, and it's like, just hold it in. It's like it doesn't work like that.
In all fairness, someone was on a programme the other day and they couldn't go to the toilet or something, so someone was like, well, just put a tampon in.
Pardon? Wait, they couldn't, like,
so they weren't allowed to go to the toilet. It was part of some, like, game show thing, and they were like, it's okay for girls because they could just put a tampon in.
That's a really common one, like, people not knowing the anatomy, that your urethra is different to your vagina.
I'm baffled that someone can even think that.
Yeah. But again, if you've not had that education, if you felt embarrassed, there's lots of reasons why that might be the case, and I think that's why the education surrounding it is so important. Yeah. So I do think
boys and girls together,
absolutely, and everybody learning about it, and again, it not being this embarrassing thing. I also think the other thing to say is, I think sometimes it's viewed as being, like, quite funny, like, when you're that age, and there is. I can totally see how people see that as being quite light-hearted, like, it's okay, like, to make, but you do get a danger then. So this is an example of, like, so most schools that I've worked at, particularly in more recent years, on every corridor that you're in, there will be a box of period products. So you can go and access that whenever you want. There was one school that I worked at that didn't have that, and the reason they didn't have it was because, like, they found that students were getting it out, sticking it to each other's blazers, but this is what I mean, and it's difficult because you're like, well, that's that's obviously quite a silly thing to do, but we're all young once, you can kind of understand how that happens. But I also, there's a darker side of that, isn't there, where it's funny and you're rocking it, and it's, you know, your friend's got 15 sanitary towels on the back of the blazer.
This is the thing though, because anything that you're not meant to speak about or that's made to seem a bit like
taboo,
is more intriguing and more hilarious as a child.
Yeah. Exactly.
It just is. Going to the toilet is the funniest thing if someone goes to the toilet.
Hilarious. It is the funniest.
But and like with that, I remember everyone used to put pegs on the back of the physics teacher's blazers and stuff.
Just to mix it up a bit.
Yeah, because it was something that it was naughty, so it was funny.
Yeah. And I think this is the thing that we don't, you know, I don't want to homogenise, but generally, in my experience, the students doing that are boys who are sticking sanitary shells to each other. Not always, but generally. And I think that comes from, like, it's unknown, it's funny, but what we have to think of is, like, you know, I'm sure, you know, you might in the moment find that quite funny, but actually what you internalise with that is that, oh, it's a bit embarrassing, like it's something to laugh at. Yeah. And actually, you know, it's if you're not careful, it's a bit pernicious, isn't it? And that's why I think it is so important from a young age for it to be normal that seeing a sanitary towel is not shocking. Seeing a Tampax isn't shocking.
Yeah. And that is exactly why you need to teach the boys as well as the girls, because otherwise they'll not understand what these little products are.
Yeah, and they're there for a reason.
Will then be maybe a bit shocked when they see them, and that'll come out as probably them sticking them on someone else's back. Yeah.
I remember I'll tell you the boy's name off air. But when we were at school, I had my little blazer on, and in the pocket I had a sanitary towel, and I had
not a sanitary towel.
Sorry, pad.
A period pad.
Period pad, because sanitary has connotations of something being unclean. I did listen to the podcast. I do know. I'm a fan. I do know. Sorry, a period pad.
I'm not telling you off.
I hate myself. I'm sorry. So I had a
period pad.
A period pad in my pocket, and I had some spare underwear just in case. Yeah, and I remember, sensible, just making sure I was okay.
That's what we were told to do. When you're waiting for your period.
You know, just pop a pair of knickers in there. And so I did that, being safe. Anyway, a boy in my class picked up my blazer by mistake, put it on, and you know when you can kind of see it in slow motion, he like, no, put his hand in, and then he's like waving around like my next pink knickers.
I was gonna say, can you remember which one?
Yeah, and like they were like age 11 to 12. Like it was all just quite hard. But I remember just thinking at the time, like, this is the worst thing. Yeah. Like, this is awful. And like the thing is, it was so embarrassing. And the thing is, people found it funny because it was funny. This idea of like someone, you know.
But to you, that's mortifying.
That was absolutely mortifying. And I remember after that, never wanting to bring things into school because I was so embarrassed that someone might find them. And again, this is just my personal experience. Not to generalise, but particularly boys finding it, because it was like, oh my goodness, like there was this, it was like a running joke.
Yeah.
So
imagine she wears underpants.
But I'd like to believe.
I forget you call them underpants.
No. Sorry. That was a nice. That was. It was surprising, but it was a nice term. But I think like that's why it's so important. Like, there's so many facets to it, isn't it? Why it's so important. But like, you know, we don't want young girls to go through that. No. Where the worst thing that could happen is someone might find that you have something associated with your period on your person. That shouldn't be mortifying. It shouldn't be embarrassing.
The conversations that happened as well would be so different. Like, I remember, obviously, boys making jokes, it being such a funny thing. But then I remember as well, I was quite late to start my period, and it was a conversation just all the girls in my class were talking about, and they're like, who started the periods? And I was the only one that hadn't. And I was like, this is horrible. Like, everyone else has it. I need it. And I remember going home and Googling, like, it was on WikiHow, I think it was, like, how to get your period. How to get your period quick. And it was like hot baths, drink loads of this, like,
not
special tea. I fully was like, I need my period.
It's not really true. But I think it's interesting, the topic of starting your period.
Yeah.
Because that is something that is stipulated in the PSHE guidelines, particularly for primary.
Okay.
That you should, like, basically, I think the actual word they use is, it could be alarming if you don't know what that is.
I mean, that's true.
I mean, that is really true. And obviously, like, you know, I know you all know that there is a wide range of ages that you can start your period. And I think it's, the more that that's talked about, and the more that that's kind of commonplace and part of the conversation, I think is really important.
Do you think it is being talked about more?
It's hard for me to say that, because I am not in primary. Okay. So I don't know. What I will say is, I know that, you know, obviously periods being part of the secondary education, it is talked about. And I also will say, I suppose, because they are that bit older, so in my current school, I really appreciate that period products are absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. Like, they're quite visible, like they're around. Yeah. And again, I think that's great. I think that's how it should be. And, you know, girls will openly say to me, I need to go to the box. And like, that's not seen as anything bad or wrong or anything like that. That's just something.
The box.
Yeah, it's just the box.
I remember sitting in lessons and having to like subtly get one silently out of your bag, get it into pocket on your sleeve, and then being like, Miss, I need to go. So it's nice that now they're just like, I need to go to the box.
Yeah, and I also think it's interesting with teachers as well with that. So I think like I remember once I was talking to the deputy head. It was one of my first years. In fact, it was my first year of teaching, and I'd gone to the toilet and I had a tampax under my sleeve, and I was talking and I was like gesticulating and it fell out, and he was like, I think something's fallen out of your pocket. Or your sleeve, and I was like, brilliant. Oh, okay.
Why do I still think that embarrassing?
And you're just like, sorry. But that shouldn't be embarrassing. And actually, I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because I suppose if we think about it, I don't know whether you'd necessarily say, I'm going to go to the toilet now. Yeah. I get that there's a degree of privacy, and I do understand that. But I also, sometimes I have to check myself where actually, if that happens in school, if your, period pad or your tampon or whatever it might be, like, that's, I think, like, the first emotion that you're describing there is like, oh my gosh, that's so embarrassing. And actually, it probably starts with us, doesn't it? And I think there is a degree to which, obviously, there needs to be boundaries in place with the children that you're teaching. It's not appropriate to talk about your toilet habits, absolutely not. But there is something to be said about, like, you're not embarrassed about that either. And I think there's lots of nuances to that. It's a delicate line to walk, but I hope you get what I'm trying to say there. There is something to be said about it being visible and it's not being embarrassed either.
Definitely. Really remember my friend had broken a knee, had a knee injury on crutches, and had a tampon up her sleeve and dropped it, but couldn't get it because she was on crutches. And it was difficult. But we all found it at the time the funniest thing in the world that she couldn't pick it up from the floor, and she found it funny at the time as well. But then when you think back on it, then that again, the laughing about it and everyone's like joking around, it's like, it's normal.
But again, and I think there are topics that
I think it's quite funny.
I mean, it was really funny. I think as humans, sometimes we process things through humour, don't we? Yeah. Like, I think sometimes when we're trying to, I don't think there's anything wrong with, like, obviously when you're laughing to the point where it's pernicious and it means that people feel ashamed of something, that's obviously a bit different. Yeah. But I think that I also completely get why I think teenagers quite often will laugh at something to make sense of it, and I think I get why that happens. But we want there to be a point where it's like, okay,
we can laugh about it.
Yeah, but it's not something. We all
have a good level of understanding about it to not always just find it funny. Yeah, we're embarrassed.
We get that. That's just a product that you might need.
So moving on a bit more to do like with periods rather than sex and sex education. We obviously really want lots of people to understand what a normal period is, what are normal symptoms of a normal period, so that people can understand what is not normal, and then when they need to go to the GP or someone they can advocate for themselves. So within the curriculum, what is taught about periods? Is it just like the normal menstrual cycle and normal periods? Do you go into things like heavy, painful periods?
So there is a separate section on the guidance for menstruation, and it's menstruation. I don't know why I said it like that. Menstruation. It's quite a hard word to say, isn't it?
Yeah.
Menstruation. How do you say it?
Menstruation. I would probably just say periods.
I think you find it hard to say medicine, though, don't you? You never know whether you want to say medicine or medicine.
I do. I struggle with that. Yeah, medicine or medicine.
She struggles.
I think I've gone with medicine.
But you know what it is, because when you're at that point where you're introducing yourself and like what course you do. And Alison would always not really want to say that she was doing it. Yeah, so I'd be like, I'm Nicky and I'm doing English. And Alison would be like, I'm Alison and I'm doing nothing. and we'd be like, why are you saying it like that? And she'd be like, I just get awkward because I don't know if it's medicine or medicine.
I think I've got over that now.
Yeah, no,
I think so.
Anyway. I feel like it was very cruel of me to bring that up when it was like about 12 years ago. I'm very sorry. It just made me reminded me of that. Yeah, I think I feel insecure about how to say menstruation. I've just realised that on the podcast. But there is a separate section, and basically it's quite big because I think it kind of probably has to be to encompass different elements. But in being quite big, you open yourself up for inconsistencies. So the key word for it is basically actually is girls learn about it. There isn't a huge amount of emphasis on everybody having to learn about it, so that's the first thing. And it talks about the importance of not being alarmed and teaching children when that's going to happen. And it is quite big. It's just about kind of like period products that you can access. I think that there is something about pain, but it is not detailed. And I know you guys have spoken about this at length, but I do think that is such an important thing to say. Like, and I know you did it brilliantly for our school, but not everybody is. That's a very individual thing, isn't it? Like, I'm just really lucky.
She's very individual.
She's so unique. But I think Alison does medicine. I'm really lucky that we have that connection, and that's wonderful. But obviously, not all schools have that, and I don't think it should come down to luck or fortune. Exactly. So I think what's on the curriculum could very easily be taught and not cover like what is not a normal amount of pain and not a normal amount of bleeding or whatever that might be. Like I don't think that is something, in my experience anyway, I don't think that is taught in as much detail as it probably should be.
Is anything touched upon as like endometriosis or fibroids or polycystic ovaries or?
I don't think any of those things are specifically named. Okay. I know that miscarriage is named.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah, it is,
like how to get pregnant covered?
Yes, that is covered. That is part of sex education.
Yeah, okay.
Is the focus on how not to get pregnant?
Yes.
Yeah.
As in, like, so there is. I'm trying to think of the exact word, and it's obviously just quite a lengthy document. I don't want to misquote it. But
would you expect us to have it memorized?
Need to know it.
That was your homework.
No, memorise the PSHE document. So it is mainly about kind of
the biology of it.
The biology of it, and also about preventative measures for getting pregnant.
Because I wonder whether that we've got a whole we have a whole episode on like how to get pregnant, and also then an episode about infertility and subfertility.
Yeah, of course,
because I think a lot of people who get to our age and beyond realise that in your teenage years you're taught like if you even go near a boy when you're ovulating, you'll get pregnant. Yeah. Don't do that. And then when you're a bit older and you actually want to try and get pregnant, you think it'll happen straight away, and it can be quite damaging for a lot of people who then realise that it's normal for it to take up to a year or even 2 years.
Yes.
But because you're taught in a bit of a skewed way that everyone's really fertile and you'll get pregnant straight away as soon as you try. So don't try until you're ready. Then I think that does have a negative effect on a lot of people's.
I agree. I think that
lives.
so there is quite a big emphasis on healthy relationships and within that making sure that it's enjoyable, it's consensual. Oh, yeah. That is part of it. So I don't think it's all completely skewed to just don't you are so fertile you will immediately get pregnant. I think the thinking has come on since then, which is thankful, is merciful. But we shouldn't be like it'll take you a year, you can have a year of trying.
There's a balance there.
And I think that the focus
a year of no condoms, and then you should start wearing them.
I think there's a real focus around it being like respectful and what that means, and I think that is obviously so important for that age group when you are navigating that, it's so important. But it's hard, isn't it? Because I know you guys have talked about this. I think as a society, infertility isn't represented particularly well, and I also think even with that in IVF, I don't think the subparts of IVF, like genetic IVF, all those things, I don't think they are very well represented either. So it's a challenge, isn't it? Because you want education to make sure that students are up to speed, but then as a society, I don't think we're really very far along with those things in the way that we should be. It's a hard one, isn't it?
How do you bring in miscarriage? Because I feel like you've talked about how not to get pregnant. Yeah. How does miscarriage come into it? Do you talk about abortion?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Yeah. So we talk about pregnancy and about how it's really important that you have impartial information on that. Yeah. So what your different options are, and I think if I remember rightly, within that area, miscarriage is covered as part of it. Yeah. And I think it's really important that is covered 100%. But again, I think that probably will look different depending on which school you're in, because actually miscarriage in itself, as I know you all know, is a huge topic, and there's so much to discuss about that, and because it's part of one bit of guidance, and I know we've already talked about the time and all those things, it might not necessarily get the coverage that it might be beneficial to have, and that's the thing to keep in mind.
It brings it back again to the fact that it might just be squeezed into a form in the morning.
Exactly.
There's no
and actually that's that's an important thing I think to know about for life and for when you get older. But also, you know, you might have a parent or a relative that's had a miscarriage, and it's such an you know, I know you've all talked about how it's not spoken about enough and all those things, but actually, like, as a young person, I think that's a really hard thing to navigate, this idea of loss, and I think there is a lot to be said around that, and grief is a big part of PSHE as well, and bereavement and those things, and I think, you know, miscarriage obviously is a loss, I think, and as a child, if you're navigating that, if that's your parent or your sibling, I think having that part of it is really important.
Yeah, definitely. I get the letters so confused,
because I feel like we've said it wrong so many times.
We used to have PSHE, and I don't know what the letters meant.
Wow, that's a lot.
They were doing a bumper version in your school.
Yeah, we had extra E's.
No H.
No H.
No.
I just think we called it sex education, didn't we?
We didn't.
Did it even have a name?
Just call it education.
We had a lesson once every 2 weeks that was called inquiry skills.
Did we?
And I think we were meant to inquire.
I think it was like once a year, at the end of the year, there'd be like a full day of special things that you do, like sex ed.
But like go to Alton Towers.
It would be a week.
What's going on
Activities
there?
week. I remember it now. It's called Activities Week. If you were good, you got to go to Flamingo Land on one of the days.
And have sex education if you were good.
One of the days was like a PSHE day, which you got sex education in, and there was other fun things. Maybe like a industry day or something like that.
Okay,
careers day.
We had PSE every week.
Is menopause featured in the PSHE curriculum?
Menopause is featured, but
That's really good.
again, how much that is covered is a different thing. And I also think in schools, I think the thinking around menopause has definitely come a long way. But I think it could be better in schools, is what I
I
would
guess that's
say.
progress, though. You know, it definitely wasn't covered when we were in school.
Oh my gosh, no, it definitely
Think
was.
about, I mean, that was only like 3 or 4 years ago, so it's not really that long, I suppose.
It was
changed
6
really
months ago.
quickly.
Yeah, it's really
Giggles, really got away with it.
no, and I think obviously the menopause is obviously really important to learn about for so many reasons, but I think it's good that it's part of it, but again, I come back to this idea, I don't know how much that is covered. And I also think it's making that really relevant, isn't it, to young people? So it's a really important thing to go through. I think what's hard is that, you know, when you are 14, 15, the menopause might feel like a very long way away.
Yeah,
and
it's forever.
But I think it's the same as what you said. It might be that their parents.
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
Or their teachers might be.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's why
It's quite useful to be mindful.
Exactly, it's important. But I think, but for me as well about the menopause, it's important to kind of, I know you've all talked about this, but tackling the misconceptions around it, and there is obviously such an inherent sexism in the misconceptions and stereotypes around menopause that I think it's so important to say that when they are younger. I think what's hard with it is making it feel relevant to them, and I think that's where you have to bring in, like, I know that this doesn't feel something that is going to be immediately relevant to you personally, but it's something that people around you will experience.
It's similar to like teaching boys about periods.
Yeah, of course.
They're not going to have a period, but they're going to have
They're going to be
friends,
affected by them.
girlfriends, wives, mothers, kids that are going to have them.
Yeah,
of course.
It comes back to the
I
whole,
think there
like,
are just-
women make up more than half of the society and the
51.
population. So if something happens to every woman, then it's really important for everyone to know about it, because it impacts the whole of society, not just that person who's experiencing it.
I think there are key facts that you need to know at different stages, and that's where people fall down. For example, for fertility, your fertility declines massively from age about 37, 38, and then by the age of 42, the chances of getting pregnant are really tiny, and yet the amount of people that are educated people that come through to a fertility clinic that are like, pardon what? And you're like, and I know this is a different generation now because the people that you're teaching aren't 42, but I'm just saying we need to get it right somewhere so that people have, and especially at this day and age where people are kind of waiting till later because they're not able to afford their own house, they're not able to move out of home, they've got massive debts from university, but just kind of having like you need to have a think about if this is something you want to do, because genuinely you will lose out of time if you don't.
And being in school is the like prime time to do that, because when else do you have a group of people all together that you can teach them? Like, you can put stuff on social media posts, but not everyone sees that. You can put something on the telly, on the news, not everyone sees it.
On the wrong channel.
I watch the news in the morning. At school, if people, you have to be there, you have to listen. It's perfect
a good
time.
opportunity.
Yeah,
But they're just facts. You know, like you have to learn facts at school.
These are
These are actual facts.
about us, not even about the things that we're gonna do.
And again, I think the way that that's delivered is really important, because I think we know that there's a lot of misogyny in the way that kind of starting a family is spoken about, and this idea, but like you're saying, there are facts, and then there is sometimes the rhetoric surrounding that. So obviously the way that the media will focus on women within a certain age bracket, and it'll be like, are they pregnant? What will that mean? And the idea of the clock ticking, and those kind of constructs that have been made by society, I think they are quite limiting and quite unhelpful. And actually having the factual information, and it being like, this isn't being said to you because you have to be in a rush, or it's to make informed choices.
It's probably better, because I feel like if you find out this when you're 25, it's a lot more scary. If you find out when you're 12, 13, 14, 15, it's a bit more like, oh, good to know. That's something that, you know, like it's more of like you've learned it at the beginning.
And I think it's, like you say, you don't want it to be something that you've not got this clock above your head. It's more just, you know about it. You're aware, and like you say, you don't want to get to a point where it's brand new information, and actually that's not very helpful. That's not the right time for you.
And also, you mentioned that obviously can be quite a difficult conversation, but what exactly do you teach about consent?
So the whole thing around it is obviously being respectful, having clear consent. I don't know if you'll be familiar with this, but it's very popular in the PSHE teaching world. The cup of tea analogy.
Yes.
I've seen a video.
Someone might say they want tea, but once you've made it, if they don't want tea anymore, don't
if they start drinking the tea and then they don't want to have the tea anymore, you have to stop.
It's fine.
We'll put a link.
It's really good.
So I feel like that.
I'll have a cup of tea.
We'll put a link at the bottom of the episode.
I don't want a cup of tea.
So if you're not familiar with it, the cup of tea analogy is essentially like, you know, you should treat sex and consent as you would a cup of tea. So if you say to somebody, do you want a cup of tea? And they say, yes, that's fine, give me a cup of tea. If they say, I'm just like, are you leaving half that cup? I've made the effort. Well, essentially, like, they might want a bit of tea and be like, I've actually changed my mind now, I don't want any more tea.
And I'd be like, oh, why do you even want to make it?
And then like,
that's kind of against
I think you maybe gone against the principle slightly there. And then one of them is like, you know, if they fall asleep, obviously you wouldn't make them continue drinking tea. And it's those kinds of things. I think it was just meant to be like, think about the cup of tea.
It's a nice simple analogy.
So I
remember it.
It's very British.
It works.
But you could change it to a Coke, you know? It doesn't have to be a tea.
An
iron brew for Scotland.
Can you remember? I don't know where I've seen this. Oh no, I haven't seen it. I'm imagining it's Miranda has seen this. She said all that was in her sex education was a woman on a lilo in the middle of a swimming pool, and then men were all stood round the swimming pool in speedos, and they all had to dive in and swim and be the first man to get onto the lilo, and that was the sperm getting to the egg, and she was like, and that's how babies are made.
In swimming pool?
So I did think this earlier. Another Miranda analogy would be that when her mum, sorry if no one's watched Miranda, when her mum mimes words that are like controversial.
Oh yeah.
Because she gets it wrong.
Yeah, she gets it wrong. But it could be when people are like, periods.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need to be. It can be periods.
Yeah, you can say it. That's all right. It's like medicine and menstruation. Like you can say it. It's
Just
fine.
say
Don't
it.
worry about it.
Yeah.
I think it's
That's
important.
good. We'll put a link to that video at the bottom of the.
Yeah. So
I'll let Nick watch it.
Yeah, but I think so. There's in my experience, because when you look at the PSHE curriculum, obviously you make decisions around what is right for your school's context. So you will be looking at, right, that issue is something that we know actually it's really important that we're getting that across. All of it's important, but actually we're going to really put a spotlight, or we're really going to zoom in on that particular thing. So I know that a lot of schools, in my experience, lots of schools, consent is a one that you spend a lot of time on, which quite rightly so. And so I'm the cup of tea when I'm making light of it, but obviously it is actually a very helpful clip, and it's quite like, you can just be like, yeah, cup of tea. Like most people remember it once they've seen it, and you're in for a treat. But there is lots to talk about around consent, and I think particularly now, I know I keep going on about the perils of the internet. I sound very old, but I think particularly when young people might be viewing content where consent isn't obvious, where actually the lines around consent are deliberately distorted. It's very important to be very clear about that, and I think that's where all the other things tie in around children understanding, pornography, actually, this idea that, the lines of consent might be deliberately distorted for that, but that doesn't make it right. That's not something that you should be doing. Yeah. So that's why they all kind of interlink, don't they, all these things. But it's really important, I think, particularly where, children will gain information from different sources, so from online that isn't necessarily, or is quite often quite flawed. It's really important that we, as the adults, are being very, very clear about what that looks like, how that is something that is going to be very different than something you might see depicted in a different way.
Something that wasn't taught in our school to do with consent, and I think you actually do see how much of a positive effect that has. It's like now, like people who are 17, 18 who are sexually assaulted, they actually have a lot more of an understanding about what consent is and what should and shouldn't have happened, compared to women who are in their 30s, 40s, who often are a bit more like, 40s, 50s, are a little bit more like, oh, well, was it consent, was it not? No, I'm unsure about it. It's really important. That'll make such a massive impact on society as a whole.
Well, if you have the words for it and if you have a framework for it, then you're much more able to identify when that's been crossed.
And for boys, or, not always boys who are like the ones that are doing sexual assault, but if everyone is taught and everyone understands what consent is, then that actually reduces the chance of there being any non-consensual things that happen later on.
And I think those areas, I know we were making like the cup of tea, but this idea that it's okay if you wanted to stop. And I think classically,
and being able to verbalise
that's been viewed as a it shouldn't be, but it's been viewed as a grey area. Well, it started now, so actually I've kind of got to go along with it, or somehow or it's I wasn't clear, or whatever it might be. Like actually having that kind of, I don't know, the cup of tea thing is actually, I think it's got like millions of views, but having something that like nationally, I know I'm making a joke about it, but I really mean it, like nationally lots of people have seen that, like actually if you've all got this frame of reference, I think that's a really powerful thing.
It might be that Nick made me a cup of tea and it was crap, it was like, really weak, there was like too much milk, I might have not wanted to finish it.
Don't want to make you feel bad, but she said you don't make a good bread.
She makes a good bread.
She appreciates it first.
I was going to say, you don't have tea in my house.
No. On that sort of topic of things that are a little bit more controversial, difficult to talk about. So we've talked about pornography and consent, gender identity, sexual orientation. That must come into the
that does
RSE.
come into it. It comes into it as part of. It comes into it in many forms, but it comes into it as part of. Like the Equality Act as well, and laws, and different ways that you might identify. So that does definitely come into it, and it comes into it as part of RSE in that it's understanding like different types of relationships and how that will look.
Yeah. So it's all very like accepting and open and transparent about people having different sexual orientations and different gender identities.
Yes. What I will say is, again, it comes down to how much that is covered and what that looks like. But yes, that is part of it.
And has there been any? I wonder whether there's any kind of not backlash, but pushback from parents, because obviously parents might not want their children to know certain things that the curriculum actually suggests that they should know. And do you ever have any difficult situations like that come up?
So I know that obviously nationally there are schools where parents have protested and don't want that to happen. You can withdraw your child from RSE if that's your decision. You have the right to do that. There are lots of reasons why parents might decide to do that. But again, like it's about. Obviously, why you choose to do that is absolutely your decision. It's an individual decision. But I think it's important that, they are equipped and they learn about that elsewhere. If you don't feel like school is the right environment, that's your choice. But it's making sure that, children are ready to go in the world. They understand about these things. But yes, there has nationally been, I know that there's been concerns raised. And I think what's really hard is that I'm not a parent, but I can understand that some of the things that you're reading as part of this, they are, it's quite shocking. If you're reading that your child is being taught about something that you're thinking, oh my goodness, like I don't want them to know about that. But the reality is,
times have changed.
But I suppose that's what I'm trying to get across. Actually,
I can see. I think that the learning about pornography is probably one of the main ones. Am I right?
There's different.
I guess it depends on the parents' culture, religion.
There's different layers of contention for different things. But what I would say is that I think the understanding has to be. It's around like understanding how to interact with something in a thoughtful, respectful, kind of informed way. It's not a tutorial on how to access something, if that makes sense. Because that would be wildly inappropriate. And I also think the big thing throughout the PSHE guidance, it does say it has to be age appropriate. So what that is the decision that the school has to make around, okay, so what do we think is appropriate? What do we think is the right thing? And it's getting the balance right between, I can totally understand that you might think, I don't want my child to learn about that. Like, I don't, it's almost like they didn't know about it before and I don't want to give them that information. Yeah. But it's also about, well, if that comes up for that child and they've never had any information about it, it's a really hard balance to strike. And I respect that, parents know their children best, but it's also about we as educators, we know it's in the education system for a reason. Yeah. And it's getting that balance.
And I think when it's in the education system, it's controlled. Well, I know it's a curriculum, so it's different in different schools, but it's more controlled than where if it was like,
TikTok.
Or like parents teach your child about this. Some parents and children might have a really open relationship and discuss that in depth, and the kids can feel like they can ask questions to the parents, but other people don't. And they just might not ask anything. I mean, we have a very open household, and my brother used to ask any question that would come up ever to my mum, and she would happily answer. But it's just not always the case.
Yeah, not everyone has.
And I think that's the importance. Obviously, that is why we insist that children are in education in the UK, because it is a leveller. It is something that everybody accesses, and obviously PSHE. We want that for all children, don't we? That they're all equipped with this knowledge and they're able to go out into the world. But it's, when you're talking about things that are quite sensitive, that are going to be quite difficult. It might be quite difficult for some parents. Do you know what I mean? I can understand. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I can understand that raises discussion. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to keep on having the discussion and actually really being open with why that's part of the curriculum and why that's being taught, and actually really getting across that everybody is doing that with the children's best interests at heart. Mm-hmm. It's not to be like a corrupting force. It's not to make children feel traumatized by learning about something that feels really uncomfortable. It's really about making sure that all children, like you say, not just the children that feel able to ask those questions or have that information source on tap, it's about all children having that. And it's a difficult balance to strike, isn't it?
Well, as we always say, knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't mean that you just because you know about something you're going to go out and do it. It actually means that you're equipped to understand it, whether or not that is something that you get exposed to or not.
Factually correct. You've not understood it by reading in between the lines or by being embarrassed about something or looking up a video that's infactual on an online
TikTok.
Exactly.
So we've covered a lot of different things there. I think it's been very
enlightening
and so interesting to hear so much about it, and you're clearly so passionate about it. And you've done so much in your career so far. It's just great to hear what what you think how it should be taught, and
I also think, just my last thing is, I think that I think that period,
we're not finished yet.
Period pant companies should pair with schools, because I think that'll be a more sustainable long term option. I think that would be really good. I think, and also it means that if getting period products is a barrier or is difficult, actually, if you had a couple of pairs of period knickers, you'd be able to wash those, you'd be able to reuse them.
Would you put them in the box?
Well, I don't know whether we'd be able to put them in the box.
I don't want to share those.
Don't know whether they'd be a communal item.
But period products generally aren't.
Wash it and put it in.
They have to be communal, but nothing else.
I don't know why I went there.
Normally no one use.
When you finish.
I do think that would that's, although it's difficult because they are obviously a much higher price point to buy per unit, so I get that it's not always possible.
They're coming down and down and down.
That's very true.
Primark all have them.
Yes. They do. So I do. The thing is, I don't think they necessarily work for everyone. Obviously, if you've got much heavier flow, then they might not be the right thing for you. But I do think that feels like a much more sustainable option. It's something that also, if you're embarrassed to ask for those things, it takes that barrier away because you've already got it. I just think that's.
I don't think I'd trust them with white trousers on.
Oh no, that would be dangerous. But you never know. There might be some good ones out there.
I've seen lots of stuff on them. There are amazing ones, and you can definitely trust them with white trousers and swimming costumes and various different things.
I mean, you can't always trust any period product with white trousers, so
why would you be
high risk?
So we always do a section at the end, which is myths and questions. So myths that we've found.
Oh my gosh, is this what the cards are for?
Yeah. Wow. So this doesn't have to just be for you. We can all.
Thank you.
So when we found the myths for this, I would say mostly gone for sort of myths you might hear in the classroom.
Okay.
Yeah. So the first one is that boys think about sex every 7 seconds once they've been through puberty.
I've heard that myth. I'm sure that was something we were told in school.
It could actually.
I was going to say, it might be
For
true.
some, yeah.
We don't know.
who did that study?
This is the first time.
Also, how do
You
you
think there was a study?
How do you quantify? I'm going to say myth.
now.
I take a bit of an issue with that because that implies again that like
Girls don't
men,
think about
men are more sexual than girls, and that men. Yeah, but I just think why are you singling out the boys then? Maybe the girls think about sex every second.
This was the best. It wasn't me.
It might be that girls think about sex every 5 seconds.
It could
but
be.
it's just like
You assume.
But also, it's like, how do you monitor that? You're like, right, so we're all going to be in this lab. We're all going to,
I reckon if somebody gave you that prompt, you would think about it quite a lot.
Oh, yeah.
When someone tells you not to think of something, it's like
exactly.
another myth. 2 condoms are better than 1 for extra protection.
Oh, definitely not.
Double
Yeah,
round.
we can move on quickly.
It's a definite no, isn't it? Doesn't it actually make it more likely that they'll
That it's
split?
going to come off.
Next one. If someone's on the pill, it means they're definitely having sex.
Definitely not.
Good.
You can get pregnant from sharing a hot tub with a man.
I mean, if you had sex with a man in
the
a hot tub, then you could get
Could
pregnant.
get pregnant. Not recommended. Probably a bit unhygienic.
Yeah, there's a lot of chemicals in it.
Yeah.
You can tell someone's a virgin by looking at them or the way they walk.
I mean, that's totally true, obviously.
The way they walk is a good one. What does that
very
imply? Like after you've had
specific.
sex, you're
We walk differently.
It's a different walk.
I mean, if you're injured.
You're injured.
Only males.
Likely, isn't it?
Only males want sex. Women just tolerate it.
I mean,
sad.
it's
Very
really
sad. That's
isn't
really
it?
sad.
And
I feel like that's old school, like mentality.
Well, that comes from teaching. General society allowing men to talk about pleasure and sex and masturbation and not letting women talk about it. So it's moving away from that now. And obviously it isn't just men that want sex, women do too. But I feel like that is like kind of an old stigma that's hopefully being broken down a little bit.
Well, I hope we're breaking it, doing a full episode just talking about it.
Can I just say I totally misunderstood the brief for this. So I thought we were like, is it a myth or is it not? But these are all definitely
They're all
myths.
myths.
Yeah.
I got that quite. So when you were like, I was like, there's not a study done around it. Like, what do you mean? And I realised, no, they're all a myth.
Yeah.
We're just
often
confirming it. Okay.
But sometimes there's a little bit of truth to the myth
Yeah.
as well.
I've understood the assignment now.
So the last
Okay,
one,
sorry,
right?
yeah.
The last one. If someone's turned on, they want to have sex immediately.
I think we've covered this with
Cup
the
of
tea
tea.
analogy.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Nick will watch the
watch it
video
later,
and then
yeah.
answer
Play
this.
that to you later. Yeah.
So a few questions as well. Doesn't have to be just for you, sorry, I looked straight at you.
Appreciate that.
What would you say is parents' remit to teach their child? So what do you think is
Like their responsibility.
is there anything that you think is not the responsibility of school?
I think it's a very hard one, that, isn't it? I think you know, as a parent, you know your child best. And I think if you think that there is something that they're going to feel quite embarrassed about learning about, or if you think that, you know what, I think this is going to be something that's really important, or whatever it might be, I think then it makes perfect sense for you to be the one to say that. But it's a really difficult one, isn't it? It's a really difficult one.
I think you need to be honest and open. I
Yeah,
don't know
of
if you need to
course.
teach them anything, but if they've got questions,
Of course.
then you shouldn't silence a question.
Yeah.
I think it's always good to kind of, if they've got a question, it means they've really been thinking about it.
Absolutely.
Because they've verbalised it. So it's
Yeah.
not just like a straight away thing. They've thought about it and they've formed a question. If they've formed a question, you should probably have the guts to answer the question.
Yeah.
Whatever it may be, from
Even if you
Edward
need to go
or
do a
from
little
Liz.
Google.
Yeah.
Or listen to them.
Yeah, back
So-
to them, maybe you can just say, I'm going to think about that one, I'm going to answer it later on.
Yeah,
We'll have a chat over dinner.
Yeah.
Or
And
we'll have like
trying
a-
to come to it without judgment as well, I think is the biggest
Yeah.
thing. Like, you know, you might be asked a question that takes you by surprise.
Yeah.
And we're all human and that's okay, but also it's also okay to, like you say, be like, oh, I'm kind of surprised you asked that, but it's great that you have.
Yeah.
Leave it with me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the biggest thing is your relationship with your child, isn't it? That's going to be the big driving force in what that looks like. So like you say, not necessarily teaching, but like that relationship is going to be the big thing there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Perfect. I think that covered our second question, which was about how to make it as unawkward as possible. So we'll move on to the next one. So this, I think, is quite an interesting one. How is someone meant to teach a child about pleasure and not just pregnancy as a result of sex?
I think that comes down to like it being respectful, it being consensual, it being something that's enjoyable for you both. But I think that's a hard one to do, and there's so many nuances and layers to it that I think it's difficult, but a really important conversation to be having.
I guess as well, it's always hard to know, like, as a parent, do you broach the subject with your child, or do you wait for them to come to you? Do you wait until it's something that's clearly like being taught to them in schools, and you want to let them know that it's okay to talk about it at home?
Lots of opportunities. Like if you're watching something on TV, and instead of all being like, oh, and like hiding behind something, you kind of make. Used to do. Yeah, exactly.
I used to be like so embarrassed. You know, like on Coronation Street, if someone was kissing, I'd be like,
walk out the room. I can't do it.
I feel like every time we put Google Box on, there was that naked attraction when my grandma was here, and I was like, "Are you joking me?" Every time.
I watched the opening of Bridesmaids with my parents, and the opening of Bridesmaids is just quite a funny sex scene, but it's quite a their sex scene. And I genuinely, at the age of like 28, I was like, I just can't be there. I just can't sit with my parents and watch this. It's mainly because it's just very quiet.
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh, I can't do this. But like you say, I think taking that away, totally.
Up,
of course.
They're the opportunities, I think.
Absolutely.
Rather than being like, right, let's have a sit down, guys, and talk about, like, I think mix it into everyday life.
And I also think it's about kind of, I think it's okay to lean into the awkwardness slightly. I know we've talked about humour sometimes being dangerous, but actually I think around, humour is a way of processing things.
Oh my God.
Actually,
my dad would be the first one to be like, well, this is awkward. Any questions, guys? But it's better to verbalise that than be kind of like, anyone want a cup of tea?
Exactly. And I think it's there's lots of layers and nuances to that, but I think the more it can be part of everyday conversation or just something that doesn't feel too forced is probably going to be the way to go, isn't it?
And then a final question. Yes. You mentioned about teaching about different relationships within LGBTQ. Yeah. What about sex? Do you teach about any different sorts of sex in
good
LGBTQ?
Question.
So, yes, in that they teach about, obviously, that sex between different partners of different genders, different sexes would obviously be different, but then I don't think the education around that is super thorough, but I also don't think I don't know, when we're talking about pleasure, when we're talking about kind of, I feel like it's very much about, not getting pregnant, about consent, about it being respectful and consensual, and it kind of stops there. Yeah. So that is included as part of it, but I think as well, because we live in a society where I think heteronormative relationships, there is much more they're getting much more coverage, they're much more visible, and I think it's absolutely important in education they are represented and it is covered. So it is there, but I think there is definitely a conversation around making sure that is really visible and it is covered in that way. Totally.
Perfect.
Brilliant.
Covered everything there.
Well, thank you.
It's been great
Thank you for having me. Lovely.
It has been such an interesting topic. I feel like it's something we talk about a lot because we do, we often mention that we wish education was better about periods. Yeah. And that's usually because the people we're seeing are in their like 30s, 40s who haven't had this kind of update and change to menstrual education that's coming through, which is really good to hear about from you. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Lovely.
We'll just do a quick disclaimer. So everything that we've all discussed are our own opinions. Yeah. They are not affiliated with where we work, and nothing that we've said should be taken as medical advice. And that's the disclaimer. I was like, is there more to it?
I was like, I'm ready.
We'll go and watch a cup of tea.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
Okay, so if you have enjoyed this episode, learned something new, if you're going to go and watch the cup of tea video, please do leave us a review and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
It might seem like a little thing, but if you give us a 5-star review, it pushes the podcast out there, and then we can break barriers, bust myths, and give out really good information.
And we want this episode and the whole podcast to reach as many people as possible, so if you want to be a part of that ripple effect, then please hit the like button.
And make sure you're engaging with all of our content on social media and following us on all of our platforms at Between Two Ovaries.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.